Hi, everybody. I am Leslie Burkus, Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society. So happy to have you here today as we learn more about the important use of urban wood in our communities. When we think about trees and urban forestry from cradle to grave, thinking about how we can use trees that must come down in our communities for a higher and better use, perhaps beyond mulch, perhaps beyond firewood. Not that those things aren't important in our communities, but we might be able to think of ways that we could be very innovative about urban wood and how we use it for more purposes beyond the things I just mentioned there. So before we hear from Paul, Tiffany, and Kendra, I wanted to share a little bit about the Urban and Community Forestry Society. We are a membership-based organization. We are here to help people build their confidence, competence, and camaraderie for all professionals who manage trees and forests to create and sustain more livable communities. Breaking that down even further, really, we're the professional membership home for the people who make and support daily tree planting and care decisions in communities. So by that, we mean if you are hired by a municipality or a county to care for trees, we hope that you'll join this membership home. If you support people who make those decisions, maybe you work for a state or a private company and you're helping overall make sure our urban forest is healthy and helping those daily tree decision makers make their decisions, we want you part of the society as well. There's power in being with your people, and there's power with being able to knowledge share and learn from one another. And that's what this association and society is all about. We were founded in 1964 and are a 501c6 membership-based organization. Really, that's just tax language to say that we are a nonprofit. We are an international membership society, and that's really because of that next bullet point you see there. We are a professional affiliate of the International Society of Arboriculture. So we work very closely with ISA on credentialing, the Municipal Specialist certification, and just overall making sure that we can build stronger and more confident people as they make their daily tree planting decisions. And we're also a partner in community forestry with the Arbor Day Foundation, Alliance for Community Trees, and the Urban Wood Network. And really, that's just saying that we work together. A rising tide lifts all the boats, and we know that you, the people making those daily decisions, need a lot of support. And we want to make sure that we're collaborating and working together so that you receive that. Our association provides many things for our members and non-members. Our City Trees publication you see here is one of our premier publications. It has a lot of articles on technical delivery of tree and urban wood care, as well as human interest stories, telling us more about the people doing this work every day, the frontline workers who are caring for our trees. What's it like to be in their shoes? What are they experiencing? And we want to share those stories through City Trees. We also have our Arborist Exchange program, which helps provide a member benefit to folks that are within the society. It provides up to $2,000 for them to be able to travel and see urban forestry programs from a new vantage point. Maybe not seeing it beyond just on the screen here. Maybe you want to go see it in person. What does it really look like for Kendra to be managing trees in her community? You might want to go see that in person. So that this is a member benefit for folks to be able to travel. We really hope you'll take advantage of that. We also have an annual conference every year where we bring people together to help network and knowledge share and just have those wonderful conversations that you have when you're with your people and who truly understand the work you're doing. The conference this year will be in Chicago, and hopefully you'll join us there. This is just a few examples of the many programming and offerings we have from the association. Hope that you'll check us out and find out a little bit more. The Municipal Forestry Institute is one of the another one that's more of a leadership focus. This is beyond arboricultural knowledge and how do you actually grow trees through strategic thinking, through leading your crews in a new way. How do you gain those leadership skills that are going to move you to the next level? So again, beyond technical arboriculture, this is how do you become a leader within urban forestry? And this will be coming up again in early 2025. So again, just a quick rundown of the programs we offer. If you are not a member, really hope that you'll join this society. There's power in numbers. There's power in bringing with your people. And the more our membership grows, the more impact can grow. So if you're not a member, hope that you'll join us when the time is right. If you are a member, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support and want to have you here. So thank you again. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to start the webinar.
My name is Paul Hickman. I am the founder and CEO of Urban Ashes. We are based out of Michigan, but doing work all over the country. Historically, we were a manufacture for about 10 years, and then 2019 shifted our focus to work on building infrastructure on the front end supply side and working with municipalities, but also working on the back end or the back end, the markets, making sure we develop markets to utilize these trees when they do come down. So today we're going to focus on municipal urban wood recycling programs. We've got Kendra Boot from Fort Collins, and Kendra will talk a little bit about their program, but it's, I believe, over 10 years old now and doing pretty well, and we'll discuss that a little bit further. Tiffany Giacobazzi from Ann Arbor is also with us as a city forester there, who's been working with with Urban Ashes on our pilot model that is pretty much complete, or almost live, should I say. The final ink needs to dry on the paperwork. But we'll talk about that as well, and we will talk about the Urban Wood Network more in depth a little at the end, and it's definitely what ties us all together. And we are all members, the three of us, and so is UCFS. So if you are interested in that, once you learn a little more today and are not a member, please reach out to us. There is contact information at the end. So without further ado, this is an Urban Wood Network member presentation. So we want to thank our sponsors with CAL FIRE, U.S. Forest Service, Prop 68, and Wood-Mizer. They've been longtime supporters of the Urban Wood Network and urban wood utilization programs. We'll start off real simple with what is urban wood. I have kind of a shorter, catchier, I don't know if it's catchier, but more slang version of this, but it's basically any wood that came down from any tree for any reason other than its wood value. The official reading here is a little more professional sounding, but that's virtually what it is. It's also listed in the USRW standards, which are the urban wood standards that are out now. We won't touch on that today, but I do recommend that you look it up. Where does it come from? Urban wood, the name, unfortunately, is a bit of a misnomer. It's been around a long time. We've struggled with the name and changing it, and that may potentially happen in the future, but currently we are sticking with it. However, it doesn't restrict it from being from urban environments. It can come from urban, suburban, or rural, basically any places where we live or work. So if you don't know, some simple chemistry here. Most urban trees are chipped and burned and landfilled, releasing their sequestered carbon once they decay. And wood is 50% carbon by dry weight. So if you have a 50-pound slab of dried wood, 25% of that is carbon, or 25 pounds of carbon is sitting in that wood and stays in there indefinitely until that piece of wood is either burned or decays and releasing that CO2 back into the atmosphere. So what are the opportunities every year that we're looking at across America? There's roughly about 8 billion board feet available of quality urban wood that could be captured and processed and turned into viable materials and durable wood products. We capture, I don't think we have an exact amount, but I would say it's definitely under 10% of that. That equals about 12.7 million metric tons of dried urban lumber available to be produced, and 6.35 million metric tons of carbon is available to be continued to be sequestered. So when that is chipped or burned, that again is releasing that back into the atmosphere. Now, another interesting thing you can look on, there's a really nice calculator on the US EPA site. When you look at how much carbon or CO2 is lost or captured, what does that equate to in all kinds of things? And specifically looking at trees, and we're talking just the carbon and the CO2 aspect of it, the volume of urban wood that we fail every year to capture, if we were to capture all of it, equals planting about 385 million saplings and growing them for 10 years. So that's definitely not insignificant numbers, folks. Definitely pay attention to the planting and maintenance of trees, but don't realize the incredible impact it has on our environment and the atmosphere with all the decaying trees. So with that being said, just sort of the baseline stuff, I want to introduce both Kendra and Tiffany. I'm going to introduce them again real quick here. You'll see them on the screen as well, but they're going to talk specifically about Kendra's program that's about 10 years old or a little older. She'll remind me. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly again. And Tiffany, sort of what has been going on with Ann Arbor over the last couple of years, getting their pilot model established. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to one of you if you want to talk about the benefits of urban wood utilization and then take it from there. Tiffany and
Yep.
Kendra, okay.
Sorry, I had to unmute.
Okay, no problem.
I guess I will start it off. I think we all know there are a lot of benefits to an urban wood utilization program, just economic opportunities, a lot of environmental benefits, sequestering that carbon. There's an opportunity for community engagement, and then the aesthetic and cultural values. We're going to do a deeper dive into these, but these are just the overarching. Got anything to add, Kendra?
No, I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Great.
One thing maybe what we should do is just give like a quick synopsis of our programs, and then we'll hop into the barriers.
Sure.
Does that sound good to you, Tiffany?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. All right. Cool. So again, like Paul said, I'm Kendra Boot. I'm a city forester for City of Fort Collins here in Colorado. And we, as a citywide organization, created a zero waste goal citywide. That we really just wanted to make sure that our municipal operations were being very responsible about the waste that we were producing. So back in 2007, we started as a division, started a pilot program to basically figure out how we could reduce the amount of tree maintenance materials that we were, tree materials that we were producing through our tree maintenance operations from going to the landfill. So that kind of kicked us off. And then in 2009, we really solidified that, where we became zero waste. The primary uses of that wood was really just keeping it out of the landfill and turning it into mulch, right? Which is great. You're recycling it, but it's not, the highest, most value for that wood, for larger pieces of wood. So after a few years, we started setting and kind of sorting logs aside, and we can go into more details a little bit later, but just for milling and making sure that we were trying to create higher value use of those logs. So today we still are zero waste. We don't haul any materials to the landfill. And all of our products get used or either back and infused back into the community.
Tiffany, can you give a little background on your program over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I'm Tiffany Giacobazzi, and I'm the city forester for Ann Arbor. And our program is brand new. We are, like Paul said, working on getting the ink to dry on our contracts, things like that. So we really started down this road. I started with the city back in 2019, and my first week on the job, Paul reached out to me and said, "Hey, have you thought about urban wood and reutilization?" And really hadn't at that point yet. But the city around the same time was adopting its A20 carbon neutrality plan. And that's the goal of being carbon neutral by 2030, and ways that we could remove items going into the waste stream by diverting those to higher and better uses, and to be carbon neutral. And so what better way than to look at trees to see how they can help? And so we really started down that path of, well, what do we need to do? Who do we need to talk to? Those kind of things. I'm not an expert in setting these programs up. And so I reached out to those that are. I joined the Urban Wood Network. I started going to conferences and webinars and connecting on a deeper level with Urban Ashes and partners within our community. And we have had one tree come out of our urban forest off of our streets that we diverted as like a test run for our folks, our workers. And then we had, unfortunately, oak wilt in one of our nature areas, and we've actually been able to pull the wood out of that. So those are our first steps into this, the first wood coming out for a higher and better use instead of just being put into the waste system. And so we're excited, and there's been a lot of challenges and exciting things happening.
Let's talk about those challenges, I guess, or the barriers. Thank you, Tiffany. And, oh, there we go. I hand it back to Kendra, if you can just kind of give a quick overview of some of the barriers that both cities have seen here. This is a little bit mixed in with both cities seeing different things and a lot of the same barriers, but I'll turn it back to Tiffany if you want to take it from here and see how you've addressed those.
Do you want to go to the next slide, people?
Yep.
Awesome. So I'll speak to this one a little bit. So one of the biggest questions that was asked when we started kind of exploring utilizing the materials was, well, what about insect and disease? If we keep these logs in a sort yard and we're setting them aside until we can process them, what does that mean for surrounding thriving trees and the relation to insect and disease? So, you know, one thing that we, even though that was a barrier, one thing that we started looking at was like, well, what kind of insect and diseases do we have here? And how, what are their life cycles and what happens if you process the wood and so forth. So those were all these kind of questions that started coming out of that one concern or that barrier. And we realized that the majority of the insect and disease issues that we do have here in Colorado, it wasn't a serious issue because there's ways around processing the materials. For instance, most of the concerns that we have are, like bark beetles or boring insects. And so the idea of just milling the bark off of the tree down to inch and a half or 2 inches to the hardwood would help eliminate that issue. And then grinding the bark pieces that were left over, or the cants that were left over, was a way to get around that. So it's just one example. Do you have any thoughts on insect and disease at all, Tiffany?
For us, there was concern when we were dealing with the oak wilt site. Were we going to be spreading oak wilt here in Michigan? Oak wilt's a big concern for us, and it was really just all about education and talking to residents and our elected officials and reassuring them that we were looking at that and making sure that we weren't moving any actively infected oak wilt trees, and that we recognize that this could be an issue and we're addressing it.
You want to go there with that one, Tiffany? Kind of
Sure.
Look at it, because I know that's something we talked about.
Yeah, so before, I'll kind of outline what we did, and I think a lot of municipalities may operate in the same fashion. Is we would have a log yard, an area where we would stack our material, stuff that couldn't be chipped. Anything 24 inches and smaller, we could run through our chippers, and then we would take that to our composting facility to be worked into the city's compost. But those large logs, every, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, we would have to deal with this huge log pile. What do we do with it now? And we'd have to bring in a big tub grinder, and we would tub grind this, and they would just haul it away. And it's expensive. And so we were looking at how we could justify starting a new program and have it be a beneficial cost. You know what I mean? Like you were going to be potentially saving money on costs you would expend otherwise. And so that's really a road we pursued, saying, well, not only are we going to be sequestering this carbon and doing all these great things for the environment and getting a higher and better use, but we won't be spending that amount of money that we were before on disposal costs. So we're going to be reducing that. So that's kind of one of the ways that we were looking at it and how we could overcome the initial startup costs of this program.
Do you want to add to that, Kendra?
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little bit. I mean, really, for us, it was we were looking at the costs of how much we were paying to dispose of this material at the landfill, and just the thought of kind of shortening the life, the life of our landfill, and just wasting this material that could be utilized in such better ways, really kind of outweighed some of the other didn't outweigh some of the other opportunities. So we were able to shift kind of that money that we were paying in tipping fees for the landfill to processing the material, and then later came kind of wood processing and milling on site. Yeah. So, and the biggest thing with that is really just what sort of infrastructure, we'll go into this a little bit later, but what sort of infrastructure kind of exists in your community. And of course, that networking and that relationship building was really important and beneficial for our community to make that a success.
I'll jump back to you, Tiffany, on being a totally new program.
Yeah, so starting a new program, you run into things. There's initially resistance. How much is it going to cost? Who's going to run it? What's it going to take capacity wise? And so that was a real challenge, is trying to justify starting a brand new program and not doing things the way they were always done. And so working with our leaders and things like that to justify a new program is always a challenge.
Do you have any more to add to that, Kendra?
The one thing I think I will add to this, and this is something that we still have some opportunity for growth on, is that we've been talking with our facilities operations department of like how we can get this material back into our city buildings. So, we see a lot of like beetle kill pine and stuff like that coming out of our Colorado forest, which is really great. But what about this material that we have here in town, where we could utilize this material back into our say renovated or new city buildings? So there's some good opportunity there of just that relates to what Tiffany was just saying about kind of getting that support from your leadership and other departments to see and find the value in this material.
So that kind of segues into sort of tied on top of that lack of infrastructure to support a new program. If there's anything in particular, specific to this, you want to add to that, either one of you?
I think one thing I'll mention is there's no one right way of doing all of this, and so it really just depends on kind of what sort of access you have in your community. So that's that lack of infrastructure piece, and again, back to those relationships. So, what sort of businesses that you have in your community that could kind of support end uses of this material? How do you build those connections and so forth? For us, I think everywhere it's probably a pretty small or tight-knit group. But I could be wrong on that. I feel like everybody kind of knows everybody if they're a wood processor or miller. However, just having those relationships and being able to have the conversations and what are the needs, if the millers need specific dimensions, for example. I think I might be getting ahead of myself here, but okay. It'll segue nicely into the next one. But if the millers need specific dimensions for their equipment that they have, having those conversations with those end users or the processors of what their needs are and how you can maybe meet them.
Tiffany?
No, for us, we had a spot to already store our logs. It was more about who was going to be doing what with moving logs, things like that. That was really our worries.
Staff and training. Tiffany, you want to address that real quick?
For us, a big concern from our staff was, well, what does this mean? How is this going to change what we're already doing? Is this going to add a bunch of time and slow our work and process? And it was really just talking to them about making sure the logs are a certain length, a certain diameter, things like that. And but to work with them on that. And we'll be doing that as we really launch this program fully, to make sure that they're comfortable and understand what we need and go from there.
Yeah, I'm going to actually jump in a little bit on this one. When, it was definitely a clear concern with Urban Ash is working with the city on training, and that was one of the key reasons why we wanted to do the test run with the single tree. And what we actually did is we did a test run with a tree in the same week, pretty much, where one tree we were going to divert and one was going to be business as usual, pretty much the same crew. And we came out and documented it. We actually have a video of that that's available on our website that shows the process. But we really wanted to walk the tree crew through the process. And ultimately, at the end, we really found that in talking back to the crew, talking to Tiffany, that there was very little that was different and or very difficult. So it was, it's definitely a little bit different, but nothing that really changed in any dramatic way, sort of their process and timelines and things like that. And we are doing a follow-up video that's going to include those, conversations and interviews afterwards, talking to the crew, Tiffany, as well as some folks in Public Works, and how sort of running the test showed them what it's really like. And so that was very beneficial. Insurance.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I know
can I
we
add
just
something?
wrapped up. I'm sorry?
Can I add something on the staff
Oh,
training
absolutely.
too?
I'm sorry. I jumped ahead on you, Kendra.
That's okay. The only thing I was just gonna, for all those, all of you municipal arborists, municipal foresters out there on the webinar today, is that don't be afraid to work those specifications into your contracts. If you're, if you're doing contract removal contracts or something like that with local contractors, like, I think it's okay to get specific on your needs for making sure that we're getting the highest value out of these logs.
Perfect. That's a great example. Insurance, Tiffany, since I know that's relatively hot off the griddle for Ann Arbor, you want to go there?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of municipalities out there have very strict insurance requirements for contractors coming on and doing work on city property, but especially so when you're talking about large machinery, picking up large, heavy pieces of wood. And so making sure that whomever you're working with has the appropriate insurance requirements to actually come onto your property to do and pick up this wood is important. So we realized from near the beginning that we were going to want to work with very specific contractors and not just open it up to residents or anyone else coming in, simply because, they're not going to have the capacity or ability to move those logs, but they're not going to be able to meet our insurance requirements. So you have to look at what you're wanting out of your program and then making sure you're talking with your legal department to help get all of the insurance requirements and things like that taken care of, because it can take some time.
Yeah, this is where Urban Wood Network again helps, because the mill or the mills involved in Ann Arbor are all Urban Wood Network members, and so they all have a long-standing, really good standing in the industry and a proven track record and a lot of connections. So again, the Urban Wood Network is really beneficial in that aspect. I don't want to forget you again, Kendra. So do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll add to this is that here in Fort Collins, we do a waiver for the folks that are coming on site to process the material and deal with the logs. So just another thought, in addition to, the COIs or certificate of insurance, that sort of stuff. So just another thought.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now that kind of ties up into, we sort of talked about this, and I know Kendra got into a little bit, but you guys have two different models as far as the log pickup and removal goes. And I'm going to start with, back with you, Kendra. Can you talk about your model of having the milling actually occur on the city property as opposed to just picking up the logs? If you can kind of explain that real quick.
Yeah, so we've had the opportunity to purchase some land back. We were hopping sites for quite a while, but we had some opportunity to purchase some land for a wood lot that we share with a couple other departments. And on that lot, we actually have a scale because we also process or recycle asphalt in that lot as well. And also there's a composting facility. So We have most of our tree care operations is done either by our in-house crews or by contractors. So all of that material is hauled to our one woodlot, although the city's grown big enough that I think we need another woodlot on the south end of town. So with our equipment, we're just hauling the material to our woodlot and sorting it when we get on site. So our grapples will put the logs off to the side that could be utilized, and then other smaller material just goes into the pile for tub grinding. And then we also have a pile for our chip truck chip or mulch. So we have kind of a nice sorted yard. From there, we decided that if it might be a limiting factor, or a barrier for others, but for the mills that we do work with, we work with one primarily, but we have a couple other connections. We actually require them to mill on site, and there's a couple benefits to that. Really is just having the opportunity to debark the trees and leave that material on site, so it can be processed with the other material into mulch, and that's a waste wood that sorry, that's a terrible word to use for that, but there's some material left over that the mill doesn't have to worry about on their site once they mill the wood and haul it off. So and then they just use their own equipment and load it up and haul it back to their kilns in their shop. So
yeah, I'm going to add to this. With Urban Ash's work with cities across the country, I can say that pretty much every city's different with their needs, their insurance, their requirements, their land capacity, their equipment capacity, all of those things. And that's really what we focus on, is seeing what works for each municipality, using our experience with what's worked in other cities or what's worked in the past for us with over 25 years experience working with Urban Wood to really showcase what does work and what doesn't work, which is even more important with other cities. And what works for one city may not work for another city. And so that's where it helps to reach out and talk to folks that have been doing this a long time and getting involved in that. Tiffany, do you have any more you want to add to the log and pickup? I know we're running tight on time.
No, ours is I think probably a simpler model where we stack the logs. We have an area where we can separate them out, and the contractor, the Turbos, comes and picks it up and mills and processes everything on their site. Right. We don't see any of that.
Okay. Get back to the next slide. There we go. So I want to get into some numbers here, and we'll try to go a little bit quicker so we can make sure we wrap up on time. So this is sort of the potentials for, and this is a little bit in flux because we were just, I was talking to in the last year and talking to Kendra, since we initially got the data from them and sort of found some anomalies, I guess, or when we couldn't figure out what was going on. But there's their potential is roughly about 58,000 board feet of material, and that equals about 38 metric tons of sequestered carbon available to continue to be captured, and then 140 metric tons of CO2 not being released. And that's if we capture all of it. And that's equivalent to 231 trees planted and grown for 10 years. That's kind of Fort Collins capacity or potential, I guess. And we've noticed over the last couple of years, we sort of had to adjust this a little bit, and we might have time to talk about it. But they being Fort Collins, has had a really kind of strong influx of spruce, I believe, is that are having some issues. And so spruce is not such a viable material for urban wood utilization as far as lumber goes. So the numbers are down a little bit than what we would have expected. But also they are being more, because they've been able to focus more on planting and preservation, they're having more pruning cycles and being more proactive in their pruning, and so their trees are living longer. So there's that's a good thing to find out. We were trying to figure out why they didn't have as much potential as we kind of thought they were going to have. But digging a little deeper, we were able to discover that. And so looking at what they're currently realizing is sort of correlated to that also. It's between 5 and 10,000 board feet. It kind of varies every year. Like as I mentioned, the last year or two has been heavy on spruce. So the last couple of years has been down a little bit, but that equals, you can see the other numbers when it comes to carbon, CO2, and then, so when they do this, they can include in their carbon data that it's also equal to planting 481 trees. So if they're planting 1,000 trees and they know the impact of that, they're also getting the benefits shown here. Now switching over to Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor has a higher potential. A little bit that is because of the volume of trees. It's a little denser forested here. It's also a little more hardwoods and more viable lumber materials. So you're looking at 70,000 board feet, and then the correlating materials here. When we did our initial baseline LCA for Ann Arbor, they were losing, they're planting 1,000 trees, but what they were losing in year one, we were able to calculate and show them that it would take them planting 18,000 trees in year one just to make up for that loss in year one. So this really, that 3,300 really helps make a dent in that. And so this is what's projected for this year. We're looking at about 40,000 board feet that we will be able to divert from the chipper or landfill. And then the correlating numbers, roughly about 2,000 trees added to their 1,000 trees when you're talking just carbon and CO2. So a really nice bump there. Now, looking at it on a national level, to give you an idea here, as I said, every city is different, but on the national level, there's roughly, as I said earlier, about 8 billion board feet available. It's estimated at a $750 million industry. I would argue it's substantially higher than that because I don't believe that includes a lot of the sort of side businesses that are connected with this, whether it's biochar, whether it's thermally modified woods and things like that that start to get tied in with urban wood utilization, have a really close connection to them. So I would say it's well over $1 billion industry. And then you see the correlated numbers here, that 385 million trees planted a year and are planted and grown for 10 years to me is a pretty stunning number. With that being said, I want to start heading towards wrapping up here and talk about sort of the basic overall. We talked about a lot of these, but I think Tiffany's the one that came up with this term, and I really liked it, extending the benefits of our urban forests. That it definitely frees up capital. Is the idea is to decrease some of the fees for chipping and other disposal processes and get them out to local mills where you're not having to pay them to basically destroy the material. So that's a one huge benefit, and then that money can go back into better tree trimming funding as well as planting. So it frees up money for other parts of the program. And then I believe, as Kendra mentioned, decreases landfill waste and extends the life of the landfills, which I think is excellent. And it's kind of a weird thing to say, to extend the life of a landfill, but the longer it takes for us to fill them up, the better. Definitely supports local jobs and businesses, and promotes local economy. And then you also get the local economic factor benefits there. There's a multiplier specifically that when you keep the money locally, it goes up. The value of that money locally goes up tremendously. So it's supporting local businesses. And then provides local wood for municipal projects. I think Kendra mentioned this specifically, that's one thing they're working on and I know a lot of the cities, I know Baltimore and several other cities, a lot of the material as part of their agreement with the different cities, with the different mills within each city, that some of that wood is made available at a discounted rate or some sort of trade or free back to the city that they can use in municipal projects. So it becomes a great resource with an incredible story for the municipalities. Definitely back to Kendra here, is it provides inexpensive mulch and chips. And I believe, Kendra, you mentioned that there's folks in the city departments fighting over, wanting more chips. They have Fort Collins has a great giveaway program. I think you call it Mulch Day, which this photo here in the bottom left shows that they're loading up the community members' vehicles with free mulch and or discounted. I think it was free. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kendra.
All free.
Okay.
All free. And if we didn't hold that day, we'd hear about it.
Okay, so that's a big deal. Ann Arbor does something kind of similar. They spread out. How many locations, Tiffany? Do you know?
We have 5 parks that we
Okay.
we keep full, areas where residents can go and bring buckets and fill up, and we keep that going through the
Right.
entire season.
So the model, again, we talked about continuous carbon sequestration, and what's critical with our work in particular, we track from the time the tree is handed off from the time it's cut down. It is tagged with a QR code, and that follows it all the way through the milling process, all the way through manufacturing, and we're able to provide that data back to the city so they can use it in their their carbon goals. Definitely increases community pride. We get to talk about what we're doing in our city to save our trees from the chipper or from the burn pile, and how that benefits everybody. And then the other one increases local community resources. I think we all saw during COVID, particularly in the wood industry, the serious issues with supply chain. And that's because we're so dependent on long distance supply chains or international supply chains. This helps offset some of those burdens in making available some local resources. It's obviously not going to replace international or even nationally spread supply chains, but it really helps support local supply chains so you have access to stuff more easily when we're in situations like COVID. Do either one of you two? I'm trying to be a little quick here, so if either of you two have anything to add, let me know. We'll definitely have some time at the end, and a lot of these have already been mentioned, but just as a follow-up, and I'd actually like to call out. I believe it was Tiffany it was Kendra that said no silver bullet. Is that correct, Kendra? You want to talk about that real quick, and we can move through these?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning. It's just that there's no one right answer for wood utilization. And so really just, again, building those relationships in your community, building that network, being vulnerable and okay with asking questions for those that may not be part of a municipality and want to approach a municipality about wood utilization opportunities. I was a grad student who didn't really know what I was doing when I approached the city of Fort Collins. But it doesn't hurt, right? It never hurts to ask the questions and ask powerful questions of, well, how do you, if you could do it different, you do this now, but if you could do it differently, how would you do it? Or, what's your dream if you waved a magic wand, that sort of stuff. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to wrap the last ones up because they're kind of all tied together. Sorry, Tiffany. I know a lot of these are connected to you, but build local business partnerships. I know that was one of the challenges with Ann Arbor is the lack of capacity and or knowledge, and how do we do this? And so outsourcing it to businesses, in our case, Urban Ashes, but also a bunch of other Urban Wood Network members that have that capacity and that knowledge, and connecting with them. And where Fort Collins, as Kendra said, she kind of walked in with a program and kind of a better understanding, but still also needed outside partners. So that was a very big thing. And then being open-minded and patient, going through the insurance challenges and things like that. We being myself, worked on Ann Arbor for 20 years. So I was very, very patient. And I don't know if Carrie Gray's on here, who was the predecessor to Tiffany. So it's been a long thing, and I still say it's definitely worth it. And getting that senior administration on board is critical. With a high percentage of the cities that we are working with and have worked with in the past, that's probably one of the biggest barriers, as folks up in public works or higher up that just don't see the value in this, and being able to put together a presentation to really show them the value and how the benefits of it and how it can be done without any real major changes. And then get the community engagement. Tiffany talks about this a lot all the time, of having community champions that put pressure on, whether it's your local city council or your alderman or whatever it is, that you get local champions speaking to the higher ups, because that's who they actually answer to, instead of getting pressure from the lower level administration talking about it. They tend to respond more when their constituents or the community members start really pushing for it. So with that being said, I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time to talk about Urbanwood Network, is what really ties this all together. This is kind of a comprehensive overview of Urbanwood Network. I'll go through it real quick, but it leads the Urbanwood industry with membership across all industry sectors at all scales, represents the established standard. This is a big one, represents the established standards, practices, and highest quality urban wood products. Establishes consistent messaging and terminology and branding. So that helps in sort of credibility if you are a city looking for somebody that's got credibility, and it gives you access to kind of dig into that for those various potential partners. Then addresses environmental crises, promotes sustainability, and provides the tools needed to fulfill the mission. And the mission is simple. It's to divert as much of this from the waste stream as possible. And you've got a vast number of folks with high levels of experience to reach out to in the Urbanwood Network. And I highly recommend, if you're not a member, to connect with that. And with that being said, I'll give the information here. Thank you all very much. First of all, and our sort of mantra at Urbanwood Network is trees first, wood next. And the idea behind that is there's always been kind of a concern that you'll hear in cities where people are saying you're going to come cut our city trees down to turn them into lumber. Now we're much more interested in them being trees as long as absolutely possible, but making sure that we utilize them when they do come down for whatever reason other than their wood value. So on the left, you'll see QR codes, or on the bottom, QR codes here for each of the websites for Urbanwood Network, City of Fort Collins Forestry Department, City of Ann Arbor's Forestry Department, and then Urban Ash's website as well, along with our individual emails at the bottom. You can reach out to us afterwards. With that being said, I'm going to kick it back to Leslie if we want to do a Q&A, if we still have a little time, I hope.
Yes, we definitely have time. Yeah.
I'll leave this up if that's okay. Is that all right if I leave this up, or do you want to go to a different screen?
No, let's leave it up a little bit, but maybe we'll stop sharing so we can see faces here. So just leave it up for a little bit.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Sorry for my glitch at the beginning of it. For getting us started a little bit later, so that kind of rushed us here. But we've got a lot of really great questions, really practical ones from people who are probably in the field every day wondering, like, what's this going to look like when they get done? And Kendra, I saw you answer a question, and I had the same question about the selling and financial side of this. So there was a question, do you sell the logs or give them away? So what's that looking like? Is this turning into sort of profit for your city, or it sounds like you give them away? Kendra, feel free to start.
Yeah, we decided a while back that because our trees are maintained or managed with sales and use tax dollars, that general fund money, that we didn't feel right about selling the material back to businesses or community members. So we give them away. They process them on site and take it.
Okay.
Here in Ann Arbor, we'll be selling them. However, we're not allowed to, we can't make a profit. We look at the trees as infrastructure, just like any of our vehicles that we're done using and they go to auction and they're sold. We can't just give those away. There's monies invested into them. And so we want to recoup some of those monies to help fund this program to give it life. But we're not a business, so we're not allowed to do profit.
Gotcha.
And I can address that real quickly. And it varies, again, as I said, city to city, but our general model is that we take responsibility for the logs when we are managing the log yard, like in Ann Arbor. We take responsibility for the logs, and when we sell them, a percentage goes to Urban Ashes and a percentage goes back to the city. So we're sharing the benefits of that, and that varies on all the different situations of whether it's on city property or on private property. We can work those out in our contracts.
And that was a question actually about private property from Chase. And hi, Chase. Chase is a grad student who wants to do more research on urban wood. And you'll probably be seeing a survey from UCFS later. We're going to help share that out. And Chase asked, are you only using wood materials from city-owned trees, or do you receive wood from private property as well? Kendra,
Kendra?
Tiffany.
In Fort Collins, we don't have the capacity to receive material from private property. However, we do have some partnership agreements with some of our bid contractors where they will actually bring some of their materials here and trade for some of their equipment when we go through the wood processing process. So yeah, so for the most part, it's mostly for public trees because it's only a 4-acre site that we have.
Tiffany?
We don't take anything from private right now. There's been discussions with Urban Ashes about possibly having a county-wide facility potentially hosted here in Ann Arbor, but that's in the future. We really want to get our program up and going first. So right now we're only taking our materials.
Okay.
Yeah, the intent with Ann Arbor or the projections are to open it up to, once we get Ann Arbor, fully established and up and running, then it opens up to other communities in the county, and then ultimately potentially opening up to private arborists and tree services. But we want to have the foundation first before we open up into a whole bunch of other entities.
There's a question here about urban trees and maybe the worry about what's in an urban tree. Metal, they're not tall enough. I think I've heard that that you might not get enough board feet out of it. What are all the worries about harvesting urban wood? Metal has been asked specifically. Has that been an issue in your communities, or Paul? Yeah.
I can answer that one directly as a manufacturer for 10 years. It is, but it's a known issue. And so pretty much any urban mill that's been doing it for any length of time is very aware of that issue and has established practices on how to deal with it. It's a much easier now to deal with metal in logs than it used to be for multiple reasons. Technology's gotten a lot better with scanners. And then also the types of mills being used for most of the time for urban wood they're more conducive to, if they hit metal or they know a log is loaded with metal after being scanned, that they can sort of do a rough mill with blades that are already beat up, but there's all kinds of ways that they address it. It is very much a known entity. And you'll even see sometimes in Urban Wood Network or other urban wood sites sort of a competition of, what kind of weird thing did you find in a tree, and who's got the weirdest thing that they found. So it is a very known entity, but the industry deals with it extremely well, in my opinion.
I just wanted to add about weird things in trees. We had our tub grinder. It wasn't here in Fort Collins, but the company that tub grinds our materials actually found a cannonball in one of their trees. Not sure where that came from or how old it was, but that beat up the hammers of the tub grinder.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty serious.
Yeah. Well, we're approaching the top of the hour. We'll stay on for a little bit longer and keep answering questions. If you need to drop off, feel free, but we will answer those for you. I have dropped the ISA CEU code in the chat. If you're seeking ISA CEUs, please fill that out with your CEU number. And I'll also follow up with an email with this as well. There was a couple of questions in here about scale and the size of a community that could really sustain an urban wood program. Do you have any rule of thumb? What size, what population? How would you help answer that question?
I have not seen a city too small yet. And it depends on what your goals are. Really, if your goals are just simply to divert as much of this, whatever your volume that you're generating every year, there are trees that are coming down, is keeping it out of the landfill or out of the chipper or in the burn pile as much as possible. Obviously, chips are great for a lot of things, and there's a lot of material in the upper parts of the trees that can't be used for lumber. But in the case of smaller cities, and you may have a challenge finding somebody in that immediate area. I think Edina is a really good example that's been doing this. And unfortunately, I'm not thinking of the Forester's name, where the city's not that big, but they partner with other cities around there, and they get the material to different mills in the area, or they'll kind of piggyback with what Minneapolis is doing. You'll see things like that where you partner with other cities if you need to increase your volume. But I don't think any city's too small. And as you get into larger cities, it becomes logistical challenges. We're working with Detroit right now and Portland, both of them, rather large cities. And so that just takes more time. But the yield ultimately it's a big payoff in the end to make that work. So I don't think there is, a cutoff in one direction or the other. It's just different dynamics for sure. And we're happy to help with those.
Tiffany, were you going to say something?
Well, I just, Elkhart, Indiana comes to mind. Dan Coy started up a small program there, and they're a small community in Indiana, and theirs was simply they drug logs off into an area that they kept gated off, and every so often they would have days where residents could come in, they signed a waiver, and they caught hard, took the logs off and paid, I think it was $20 a log or something like that. It was very small nominal fee, and they used those funds to fund their tree planting program.
One thing I'm going to say you'll hear a lot of cities ask about auctioning logs. And if there's a city out there that's on today that's had a successful auction program, let me know. Elkhart's is a little different. I wouldn't quite call that sort of an auction. But auctions, I have not seen work across the board for multiple reasons. It tends to put the mill on a schedule that doesn't necessarily work for them. And it also can set volumes for the mills that don't work for them as well, where they need to come take a certain volume. So when you're bidding on something, really, I only want these 5 logs, but I got to buy 40 of them, kind of thing. So that becomes a challenge as well. I have not seen a city yet that has had a successful log auction. We were partnered with Grand Rapids when they did theirs a year and a half ago, and they got 0 responses with a lot of outreach. So, log auctions, not one I really recommend, but if somebody's got a way of doing it, I'd love to hear about it.
I see a question from Sarah. I'm not sure if she's still on the line, but it looks like maybe she was wanting some more details about how Urban Ashes helps the process to facilitate the log processing and sales for Ann Arbor. So I think maybe it's more like, how did that relationship start, and how are you really going to help support Ann Arbor in that programming or harvesting the logs and milling them?
Well, it started 20 years ago, working to, get the city to realize the volume of trees that they're losing and the potential benefits and impact of that. And then once that realization happened, it's really just been a matter of logistics and working with the city and seeing what their issues are or barriers and addressing those, and making it as easy as possible for the city, but also for the mill. So we get in the middle and sort of navigate and negotiate those relationships and agreements so it works for both sides. Historically, you'll hear most private mills, when you talk to them and you ask them if they get logs from their local city, they're going to say, no, we tried. It was a nightmare. We don't, we have trouble with all the bureaucracy, all the red tape, and it doesn't work for us. So they go and tend to work with private arborists most often, and they walk away from the city, potential. And then on the city side, also they don't necessarily have the capacity to understand what the businesses need, what the mills need. And so Urban Ash's 25 years of experience from manufacturing through design, through somewhat on the mill side, really understanding what it takes, because you need every partner along the way for this to work, including the end markets. And that's why we focus on making sure, because literally when those logs are dropped off in that separate pile with the QR tag, they are owned by Urban Ashes. They're our responsibility, and we sell those back out to the highest and best use, and a percentage goes back to the city. So it is in our interest to really develop the markets in the area too. So we have skin in the game, is sort of the way it goes, and we help navigate all those relationships for the city to make it as easy as possible. So I don't know if Tiffany.
Yeah, they're really a facilitator for us. So if you think about it from our municipal folks out there, if you're going to update or create an urban forest comprehensive management plan, something like that, you're going to contract out more than likely to have someone help you and guide you through this process, help with outreach, help make connections to folks that you need to connect with to really make a robust program update, urban forest management plan update. So what we did is we realized we don't have that knowledge and capacity to do that. Who does? And so we started looking, Paul is in my backyard. I'm lucky. Urban Ashes is right there. But my point is go out and find yourself that partner that can help facilitate those connections and that program. And so really he's like an intermediary between us and the mills. He understands how we work, he understands how they work, and he's able to really bring the relationships together to make that
Thank you.
Well,
Did that answer your question, Leslie?
Yeah, I think it did. That was
Okay.
Sarah's question. Well, maybe we'll just do a
Maybe-
couple. Yep,
maybe-
Sarah said yes. Yep. Go ahead.
Maybe Emily's questions kind of
Yes.
around.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead? That Emily has asked a couple of questions. I think it's getting at more of the incentives and the does this increase the incentive to remove trees sooner than maybe we would want them? Talks
No.
about are there ethical guidelines in place for ensuring this doesn't happen?
Yes. So let me answer both of those. As far as Urban Ashes goes and the Urban Wood Network goes, that's why our mantra is trees first, wood next. And we're very, very adamant about that. And we are, we being the members are very aware of that potential perception. We have not seen it on any major scale. It does pop up here and there, and we have generally been very outspoken against it, that this is not something we are for. The trees are meant to live as long as absolutely possible before they need to come down and be utilized. So I have not seen, and I think that's where Urban Wood Network and the Urban Wood Network standards, for those who want, the USRW, if you go to USR, just do a search for USRW Urban Wood, you'll find that. And adopting those standards, which are in their pilot mode now, we historically have not had standards until the last couple of years, and those are now out, and it gets into all of those details. And ultimately, we're going to have certification for members that will have the knowledge of those standards, and we know are practicing those. So it is something, again, we're very aware of, and I can, at least across my connections in Urban Wood Network and in the industry, almost entirely across the board are very adamant about making sure the trees stay up as long as possible. We're all tree lovers first, and then wood lovers next.
And I think we ultimately, Kendra and myself, have control over which trees are coming down in our urban forest. And so we know we want those trees there as long as possible. We're not able to really replace them in an effective way. We have to wait so long for trees to get that big. And then our residents are there, looking at us. Why are you taking this tree down? Things like that. So there's very justified reasons for taking the trees down that we do. And we document that very clearly in our work orders, why the tree's coming down. It's usually a resident has called in saying this tree, is there something wrong with it? We go and agree, and a tree needs to come down. Kendra, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I ditto.
Yeah. We're going towards carbon neutrality. If we were doing this simply just to keep the carbon sequestered, leaving the tree standing and alive is going to sequester 100% of the carbon that's in there, instead of the 50% we might get out, or sequester getting a better use.
Yep. Well, I think we better wrap here. Lance, I see your question about disposing and how public property. Tiffany did mention that. I'd encourage you to reach out to her and ask a few more questions on that. Thanks to everyone who's joined us. If you are a member, thank you. If you're not, hope you will join when the time is right and join us at the next UCFS webinar. Thank you, Paul, Kendra, and Tiffany. Really appreciate your time today, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for having us. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thanks.